Hey guys, tonight we step into the eerie quiet after Europe's deadliest catastrophe. The roads are muddy, but unusually empty. The churches echo with fewer coughs than prayers, and the silence in the fields tells you something terrible has happened. The Black Death has just finished its grisly tour, and if you're still alive, well, congratulations. You now live in a world drastically emptied of people and overstuffed with the belongings they left behind. You trudge through your village, once bustling with gossip chickens and badly tuned lutes. Now shutters creak on empty houses. The baker's kiln is cold. The smithy's anvil sits idle. There are no funerals anymore. There's no one left to attend them. Beneath your boots lie traces of death, too vast to bury properly. Plague Pit's grim communal graves sprawl across meadows and churchyards. They were hastily dug in the panic filled with layers of bodies that no one had time or energy to bless. The ground feels uneasy here, like the soil hasn't settled right. Your neighbor's goat bleats for someone long gone. Even the animals seem confused by the sudden stillness. You think about adopting the goat. Why not? It's not like anyone's going to object. One road over a house has been boarded up for weeks. You pry the boards loose out of necessity or sheer morbid curiosity. Inside, half a loaf of bread, a boot with a hole in it, and someone's wedding veil left crumpled on the table. You leave it all alone because you're starting to feel like you're in a ghost story, and taking souvenirs seems like a poor life choice. Historians still argue whether Europe lost one-third or as much as half its population. Either way, it's more than enough to collapse every institution around you. Courts, monasteries, markets, all of it gone quiet or gone entirely. And yet, even as death lingers in the air, something else is beginning. With so few mouths left to feed, the grain stores last longer. You eat bread 3 days in a row, and you don't even care it's stale. You're alive. That's starting to feel like a luxury. Some people whisper that this is the end of days. Others, less dramatic, but still quite shaken, think it might be the end of serfdom. You, meanwhile, are wondering who's going to clean the cesspit now that the guy who used to do it is definitely not among the living. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You head to the village green. Once used for festivals, now it's just a sheep or two chewing solemnly where the maypole used to stand. A young boy, face smudged with soot, stares at you from behind a broken fence. He doesn't speak. You don't either. What's there to say? There's talk of entire towns that no longer exist. Places like Warham Percy or Imber, abandoned, forever lost to time and bushy overgrowth. People say if you walk through at dusk, you can still hear voices, laughter, the clang of buckets. You decide not to test that theory. Instead, you climb the path up to the old priory where the monks used to chant by candlelight. Now, only wind moves through the cloisters. Someone carved mercy into the wood of the abbey door. That someone is definitely dead. Oddly enough, it's in this moment, when death is everywhere, that you begin to notice something like possibility. Yes, your family's gone. Your village is a shadow, and your mattress smells suspiciously like goat. But the world feels wide again, and in its emptiness, there's space to breathe, to think, and maybe, just maybe, to begin. You wake up hungry, and that's a good thing. Because for the first time in your life, there's enough to go around. Across the landscape, surplus rules. Not because harvests have improved or kings suddenly turned generous, but because there simply aren't enough people left to eat what's already been made. In some barns, wheat sours where no one came to mill it. In others, cows bawl with swollen udders, waiting for milkers who died months ago. You don't know it yet, but you've just stumbled into a peculiar paradox. Post-plague Europe is overflowing with goods, land, and opportunity. You pass by a noble's estate fields, sprawling out like a picnic cloth no one wants to sit on. Once dozens of peasants worked it. Now, there's a single scarecrow and a dog that barks at clouds. You could walk right in, plant a few rows of turnips, and no one would stop you. In fact, someone might thank you. Historians still argue whether this surplus truly empowered peasants or simply rearranged who got rich. But one thing's for sure: people like you aren't invisible anymore. You start hearing wild rumors. The farmer down the valley now owns 2 plows and no one to stop him. A washerwoman in town inherited 4 houses after her cousins died. You spot a cartload of salted herring being dumped because the market couldn't sell it. Salted herring, once a luxury, now fish for the pigs. At the manor kitchen, the cook, still alive and still grumpy, offers you an entire loaf and a wedge of cheese, muttering something about too much inventory. You nod solemnly. Then you eat the whole thing without guilt, watching a spider dangle off a chandelier that hasn't been dusted since the plague began. In your own hut, space has opened up in an unexpected way. Your cousin's tools are now yours. Your neighbor's cloaks hang in your closet. It's not inheritance, it's quiet survival. You sleep on a feather mattress that wasn't always yours. You drink from pewter cups someone else once prized. You feel guilty for half a second. Then you remember the coughing fits, the blackened toes, the smell of vinegar-soaked rags. You earned this. Here's a wild thought. Maybe death didn't just take people. Maybe it loosened the old social knots too. You notice things: how land is sitting idle, how lords no longer scream if you walk on the grass, how priests look nervous when villagers gather in groups. There's a tension in the air, but also a strange rising hope. You run into a former reeve in the woods. He's cutting timber alone, no longer a steward for anyone's estate. I take what I need. Now. He shrugs. You nod and help him stack logs. No one talks about taxes anymore. Who would collect them? The sheep, by the way, are doing spectacularly. With fewer mouths to feed and a sudden drop in grain, demand flocks roam freely and wool prices creep upward. You think about starting a flock of your own. All you'd need is a fence, a market, and maybe a dog that doesn't bite. Your hands, calloused from digging mass graves last season, now turn soil for planting. You've never grown anything yourself, not really. But the thought of eating your own onions fills you with pride. You even smile briefly. Then a raven croaks above you, and you scowl, because this is still the 14th century, and superstition is cheaper than soap. Still, there's a spark now. A sense that the world is momentarily up for grabs, and you, dear survivor, are holding the dice. You're no longer just surviving, you're negotiating. The village fair, once a place where you'd stand silent and hopeful while landowners barked orders, now feels different. You stroll in like someone with options, because frankly, you have them. There are too few hands and too many tasks, and suddenly your labor has weight. People ask for your help and offer coin. Yes, coin. Not barley, not leftover soup. Real jingly spendable coin. The Black Death didn't just cull half the continent, it cracked the spine of the feudal system. Serfdom, that ancient script where peasants stayed bound to land, and lord is starting to get rewritten. And it's all because there's not enough of you left to bully. You overhear a reeve offering double wages to thresh wheat. A noblewoman hires local boys to guard her manor gate, something no peasant would have done without bowing first. One cheeky lad even demands shoes and lunch for his service. She laughs, then agrees. Historians still argue whether this wage revolution was long-lasting or a passing gasp of post-plague desperation. But in the moment, it feels like a miracle. You feel bolder too. At the town square, you lean on a cart and casually tell a merchant your rates. He frowns, sputters, but pays. This is the birth of something strange: worker leverage. You joke with other villagers that you've become free agents. One man claims he turned down work at an abbey because the soup was thin and the hay lumpy. You suspect he's lying, but you let him have the moment. Even the legal system is shifting. Lords try to enforce old obligations, dragging escaped serfs into court. But half the judges are dead, and the jails are now plague dens. What are they going to do? Fine you with haunted coins. At home, you count your silver. It's not much, but it's yours. And unlike before, you actually have places to spend it. Markets expand, tradesfolk travel. A man from Flanders sells boots with iron heels. You buy a pair, strut around the village, and trip into a ditch, but with dignity. Some lords get desperate. They promise better conditions. They offer meat once a week. They even call you good fellow. You nod politely, but ask for a written contract. That more than anything stuns them. You're still cautious, of course. Some laws are passed to freeze wages to prevent your upward climb. They call them statutes of laborers, which hilariously nobody enforces. The thread is there, but the teeth rotten and falling out. You and your friends begin dreaming a bit of land. Maybe your own cart. Maybe a child who doesn't grow up coughing. You never thought of yourself as anything but replaceable. Now, for the first time, you're not. You glance at your tunic and blink twice. Is that embroidery? Somehow, in the chaos after the plague, people have started dressing better, and not just the nobles. Even your cousin Tibby, who once wore the same potato-colored smock for 3 years, now struts around in crimson. Crimson. You barely recognize him. Here's the surprise no one predicted. When half the population vanishes, there's a lot of hand-me-down clothing, and not just peasant rags. Suddenly, silk doublets, fine wool cloaks, and jeweled girdles lie abandoned in wardrobes no one's alive to open. And you modest turnip planter that you are might find yourself wearing something stitched for a knight's third cousin. Historians still argue whether this fashion flourish was rebellion or practicality, but to you, it feels like both. You wander into town and find a merchant selling imported dyes, once reserved for nobility, saffron, indigo, cochineal. You buy a swatch out of curiosity, only to realize you now own the most valuable item in your hamlet. At home, your sister experiments with patterns, stars, crescents, even a cheeky duck. The sumptuary laws still exist, those stuffy rules banning commoners from dressing above their station. But the officials who enforce them, mostly gone. And besides, who's going to stop you? The village priest now wears his dead bishop's vestments and uses gold-threaded altar cloths as curtains. One afternoon, a traveling tailor stops at your door. He offers to refit a noble's discarded cloak to your frame. You try not to look excited, but you definitely puff your chest as he measures your shoulders. He even trims the cuffs with squirrel fur, which is either luxurious or very weird, you haven't decided. At market, fashion becomes status warfare. One widow wears 14 buttons on her sleeves. A former pig boy dons a hat with a pheasant feather. Someone shows up in actual velvet. Velvet. You nearly faint. Children imitate their parents. A 5-year-old demands matching hose and tunic. You remember when kids wore sacks. Now they look like tiny barons. Even babies sport little embroidered caps. Honestly, it's getting out of hand. You notice a shift in posture. People stand taller, prouder. Clothing isn't just warmth anymore. It's armor. It's statement. It's survival, rebranded as swagger. And you're starting to like the way your shadow falls when your sleeves catch the wind. You never thought you'd own land, yet here you are, standing on a patch of earth that legally, or at least practically, belongs to you. In the pre-plague world, land was everything, and almost none of it was yours. But now, the land is everywhere, and nobody's left to claim it. Entire villages have vanished. Farms lie untended, fields grow wild, and boundaries blur like smudged ink on old parchment. You step over what used to be someone's fence and think, mine now. Here's the twist: the great landowners didn't just lose workers, they lost heirs. And with family trees snapped in half, titles, manors, and tenements pass in unexpected directions. You hear about a goat herd who inherited 4 acres because his uncle's cousin's scribe forgot to die last. It's confusing, chaotic, and it means opportunity. Historians still argue whether this redistribution truly changed class structures, but your calloused hands now hold a wooden gate to a cabbage plot, and no one's contesting it. You spend your mornings reinforcing hedges, clearing thistles, and wondering how fast potatoes grow. Hint not invented in Europe yet, but you dream big. You even start referring to the hill behind your house as your orchard, despite it being mostly brambles and one angry squirrel. A friar passing through blesses your field, then promptly asks if he can rent a corner to bury wine casks. You say yes, because that's what landowners do, make deals. At the weekly market, someone tries to sell you a goose. You haggle like a pro, secure the bird, and name it Lord Fluffington. It honks at everything, but waddles proudly across your dirt path. A nobleman sees and laughs, then asks how much for the path. You say it's not for sale. Neighbors begin erecting new structures, shacks, mills, even tiny chapels. You join in, crafting a crude barn with your cousin. It leans a bit, but it's real. You've built something. Before the plague, you were a nameless tenant. Now, people refer to your field when giving directions. Past the place where Tom's onions grow, they say. It's surreal. And when the tax collector rides through town and asks who owns what, half the village just shrugs. He rides away confused. You plant garlic because it keeps spirits and in-laws away. You dig a well. You carve your initials into a tree stump. Not because you're arrogant, but because you finally found somewhere to belong. You're not exactly sure how it starts. Maybe it's the silence in the chapel. Maybe it's the way the stars look different now, sharper, more judgmental. Or maybe it's the man with bloodied shoulders who mutters prayers while flogging himself down the road. Welcome to the spiritual aftershock. The Black Death didn't just empty homes, it cracked belief wide open. With priests dying faster than sinners and prayers doing nothing to stop the plague, faith takes a strange new turn. You start seeing things that make you pause. Crucifixes scrawled on doors in lamb's blood. Children chanting Latin backwards. Even a merchant burning herbs while walking in a circle and whispering to a pigeon. Historians still argue whether this was mass trauma religious renewal or collective panic. Whatever it was, you're in the middle of it. You join a crowd gathered around a man in a robe who claims he speaks with angels. He smells like onions and shouts a lot, but people listen. He urges everyone to walk barefoot to the sea. You make it halfway before someone steps on a nail and the group disbands. Another day, a gang of flagellants passes through. Dozens of people barefoot, shirtless, whipping themselves with knotted cords while singing funeral hymns. They move like a traveling guilt storm. You ask why they do it. A woman replies, "We suffer so, God spares us." You nod, then decide to suffer less privately, maybe with some light weeping and no blood loss. You notice saints multiplying on icons. Everyone wants a protector. Saint Sebastian gets popular for surviving arrows. Saint Roch, who had plague sores and a dog, becomes the medieval MVP. You paint his symbol on your door in chalk just in case. In town, the new priest looks about 12. He misquotes scripture and calls the book of Revelation the one with dragons and smoke. Still, he's better than nothing. The last one died mid-sermon and fell into the baptismal font. Superstition explodes. Your aunt now insists on burning rosemary before dinner. Your neighbor buries coins at the crossroads. Someone swears by pigeon hearts boiled in ale. You try it once. It's exactly as awful as it sounds. You hear rumors of cults forming strange groups, dancing in ruins, others building shrines to forgotten deities, and a handful who simply sit in trees, waiting for judgment. You pass one wave politely and keep walking. At night, you find yourself muttering half-remembered prayers, mixing Latin with gibberish, and hoping someone hears. You don't feel more holy, exactly, but more aware. As if the world behind the world has cracked open a bit. Your friend begins carving crosses into trees. Not for faith for luck. You start doing the same. And when thunder rolls across the valley, you wonder if it's weather or a warning. You're sick. But not that kind of sick. Just a fever, some coughing, and the overwhelming dread that comes with remembering what the last cough cost your entire family. You wrap yourself in a wool blanket and debate your medical options. A physician? The town had one, but he moved to Florence after deciding rats were too judgmental. A barber surgeon? Possibly. He'll bleed you for a few pennies and suggest leeches for everything from back pain to heartbreak. Welcome to the golden age of incredibly bad medicine. You trudge to the local apothecary. It's more of a spice booth with ambition. He offers you a soothing tonic made of vinegar, crushed beetles, and the juice of something that may or may not have once been a frog. You drink it, your cough gets worse. Historians still argue whether post-plague medicine improved or just became fancier nonsense, but what's certain is this: people want to heal, and they're willing to try anything. Unicorn horn powder. Sure. Ground mummy bits. Expensive, but popular. Human fat ointment. Slightly illegal. Very disturbing. Oddly effective on boils. You visit a wise woman in the woods. She crushes herbs with alarming confidence and ties a string of garlic around your neck. She slaps your forehead and calls it a diagnostic technique. You leave feeling confused, slightly better, and smelling like a salad. Despite popular belief, the classic plague doctor pointy beak mask and all doesn't really exist yet. That delightful horror show costume won't appear until the 1600s. Right now, most healers dress like damp librarians and wave burning sage with hope more than science. You meet a barber surgeon named Watt. He sharpens knives while giving unsolicited marital advice. Trust no one with dry hands, he says, then offers to lance your cough. You decline. Still change is brewing. With so many learned men dead, the medical field opens up. Barbers become surgeons. Monks become herbalists. Midwives become the go-to experts for everything from birth to embalming. Even you start recognizing plants yarrow for wounds, valerian for sleep, and that weird one your cousin swears cured his hiccups forever, it didn't. Hospitals. There are a few, mostly charitable shelters that double as plague pits with beds. You avoid them. The best medicine, you realize, is time, and soup, and maybe not licking doorknobs. Eventually your fever breaks. You light a candle not out of piety, but gratitude. You're alive, again, and in a world that's still learning how to heal, that's enough. You shuffle into church one drizzly morning, expecting solemn chants, and the usual stern nod from the priest. Instead, you're greeted by a boy who can't be older than 13, wearing robes far too big for his frame, and nervously flipping through a Latin missal upside down. Ah, yes, the church is improvising. The plague didn't just thin the congregation, it gutted the clergy. Bishops, abbots, friars gone in waves. In many towns, entire monastic communities were wiped out. And so, with holy offices vacant and rituals unperformed, the church did what it rarely does. It panicked and got practical. You've now got priests who were shepherds last year. A monk who never finished his novitiate is suddenly in charge of 3 parishes. And one nun quietly admits she was promoted after the last 6 sisters fell ill during Vespers and never got up again. Historians still argue whether this period marked a spiritual decline or a forced decentralization. But to you, it mostly feels awkward. You watch your new priest struggle to pronounce the Apostles' Creed, then accidentally bless a chicken someone brought in for healing. You suppress a giggle. He looks terrified. You feel bad, but not bad enough to help. The sermons are shorter now, sometimes suspiciously so, like someone's reading from memory and hoping no one notices. Confessions get rushed, last rites performed en masse. At one point, a friar gives communion to 5 people using a stale oatcake. It's not all bad. Some replacements are oddly kind. A former shoemaker turned deacon now visits the sick, with fresh bread and psalms half remembered from his childhood. A widow takes to reciting scripture in the village square wrongly but enthusiastically. You overhear people whisper that holiness is thinning like watered wine. Others say, this chaos proves the church was never all that sacred to begin with. And a few, the really bold ones, start questioning whether faith should only flow from Rome. In one nearby town, a woman starts a chapel in her barn. She sings lullabies that double as hymns and teaches local kids how to spell amen. Nobody stops her. You find yourself growing strangely attached to your wobbly priest. He tries so hard. His sermons are full of mixed metaphors, and once he accidentally compared the Holy Spirit to cheese. But he's there every week, robe dragging in the mud, blessing anything that doesn't run. The church itself begins to change. Less incense, more candles. Fewer gold goblets, more wooden bowls. And confession-less, sin-counting, more story-sharing. You admit to stealing onions and doubting everything. He nods, says, same, and offers absolution with a shrug. It's not the old church, but it's something. And in this weary, broken world, something feels like a blessing. The city greets you with a stench that hits like a brick wall dipped in sewage and seasoned with spoiled fish. Congratulations, you've made it to one of Europe's booming urban centers, where trade is reviving, markets are bustling, and sanitation is a charming myth. You dodge a donkey cart piled high with cabbages and something suspiciously squishy. Street criers yell prices for salted eel, while a man next to you tries to sell what he claims is a miracle rat trap made of stick string and optimism. The plague may have emptied cities, but they're filling fast again. Merchants, craftsmen, and opportunists flood back, drawn by cheap property, open guild spots, and the eternal human instinct to live uncomfortably close to strangers. You're one of them now, a small bag of coin in your belt, a vague plan, and a dream of not dying in a puddle. Historians still argue whether urban life improved after the plague or simply repopulated with better shoes. But from where you stand, it's both. There's more food, more jobs, and more excrement in the street than should ever exist in one place. You rent a room above a baker. He's missing 2 fingers and hums to his dough. At night, you hear rats skitter through the walls like they're late for a meeting. Your chamber pot freezes in winter and steams in summer. You try not to think about it. Public health measures emerge in odd ways. One neighborhood hangs rosemary bundles from every doorway. Another employs a man to bang pots at dusk to scare off disease spirits. You join in once it's oddly satisfying. Markets stretch for blocks. You buy pickled onions, a cracked ceramic mug, and a painting of a dog that looks suspiciously like a horse. A woman sells perfumes made from violet's myrrh and clean river air, a bold claim considering the state of the river. Work is everywhere. You're hired to haul stones for a cathedral restoration, then paint signs for a merchant whose name you keep misspelling. No one minds. You hear about new urban rules: don't toss waste out windows before shouting. Don't sell spoiled meat unless it's on discount. Don't bathe on market days because it confuses the fishmongers. You nod. Progress, sort of. And still, the city grows. Bells ring. Children chase pigs. Scholars argue over whether plague was divine punishment or bad air. Someone builds a public latrine, and it becomes a local landmark. You look around this mix of chaos, hope, and relentless noise and realize it's disgusting, thrilling, and very much alive. So are you. You notice something odd in the marketplace. There are women everywhere, not just shopping, running stalls, hammering shoes, pouring wax into molds. One's even shouting orders at a wagoner who obeys her like she owns the street. And she might. Before the plague, most women's labor was hidden behind walls, baking, spinning, nursing, managing homes, while men held the official titles. But when the plague swept men away by the tens of thousands, someone had to step in. And step in you did. Now, with fewer hands and looser rules, women have found daylight and kept it. You watch a blacksmith's widow finish a horseshoe, wipe soot from her cheek, and negotiate with 3 squires like it's nothing. Another runs a print stall. Well, technically, woodcuts of saints and rhyming fables, while her daughter tallies purchases. A group of nuns has even started brewing beer so strong it's banned during Lent. Historians still argue whether this was true liberation or temporary necessity. But from the look of things, women aren't keen on returning to invisible. You speak with a merchant's apprentice, formerly just the merchant's niece. She explains grain weights, river tariffs, and why saffron is a scam. You try to keep up. Guilds begin to grumble, of course. Some try to bar women. Others adjust quietly, letting widows inherit memberships or assist male relatives. You hear of one butcher who renamed his shop after his wife and just stopped showing up. At home, things shift too. Your neighbor Beatrix repairs her own roof and hosts Bible readings with a voice like a war drum. Your aunt runs the local bathhouse. Your cousin, recently married, keeps her surname and her tavern license. Even fashion joins the movement. Gowns grow more structured. Sleeves stiffen. Headgear becomes elaborate, sometimes absurd. One widow arrives at Mass in a hat shaped like a small boat. People whisper, but mostly with admiration. You see young girls learning sums, handling accounts, apprenticing in trades their brothers fled or died from, and nobody bats an eye. In quiet moments, you think of your mother. What she could have done had she lived just a little longer. This isn't paradise. Women still face danger, scorn, limitations. But the silence that used to bind their lives has cracked. And from that crack, something louder is blooming. You smile when you pass the print stall again. The woman's daughter has taken over. She barely looks 12 and she's already haggling like a queen. You wander down a road where nobody's walked in weeks, maybe months. The trees hang heavy, the path is overgrown, and there's a stillness in the air that makes your skin crawl just a little. Then you see it. A village, or what's left of one, roofs half caved, doors swinging open, a well with its bucket rotted through. No animals, no people, just the ghosts of a life that stopped mid-breath. Welcome to one of the countless ghost towns of post-plague Europe, abandoned not by war, not by fire, but by silence. One cough too many, one prayer too few, and everyone was gone. No one came back. Historians still argue whether these vanished places were evacuated, quarantined, or just faded into oblivion. But you've seen them. Dozens. Entire hamlets devoured by weeds and memory. You step carefully through a ruined cottage. A cradle rests near the hearth. A spoon lies on the floor beside a cracked bowl. You don't touch anything. Your cousin once told you about a village where the dead outnumbered the living so badly that the survivors simply walked away, left their goats, their tools, even their shoes. Said it was cursed. Said the trees whispered. You didn't believe her then. Now you do. And yet, opportunity grows in strange soil. Some brave or foolish folks move into these empty places. Squatters, settlers, scavengers. You pass a man loading roof tiles into a cart. He whistles like this is normal. Maybe it is now. You consider staying. The land is fertile. The silence is tolerable. But something about the air feels heavy. You choose not to sleep there, just in case. At the next town, you hear songs about haunted fields, spirits tending sheep, a man who walked into an abandoned chapel and came out aged 20 years. You smile uneasily. Plague leaves behind more than bones. You help a family dig up old fence posts to rebuild a pasture. They talk of starting over, of naming the place something new. You nod and carry timber. It's a good name, New Hope. At twilight, you pass another hollowed village. This one has a chapel still intact. Someone's left flowers on the altar, fresh ones. You don't ask who. You keep walking. Some absences are better left unfilled. You're sitting beside a traveling painter, watching him mix pigments made from crushed mineral soot, and he claims divinely blessed snail shells. He's painting a skeleton in a bishop's mitre, dancing with a butcher. You ask what it's for. He grins and says, "Truth." Welcome to the weird and wonderfully bleak explosion of post-plague art. Everywhere you look, bones dance. Skulls leer from tapestries. Grim reapers waltz through stained glass. It's called the Danse Macabre, and it's sweeping across Europe like a second epidemic. Only this one's made of paint and poetry. Historians still argue whether this artistic trend was catharsis or indoctrination. Either way, it's catchy. You attend a mystery play in the market square. The actors dress as kings, friars, maidens, and beggars, each approached by death in a black cloak and asked to come along now. The crowd laughs nervously, then claps, then drinks heavily. Art doesn't just depict death, it talks back to it. Illuminated manuscripts now feature grotesque doodles, skeletons chasing lovers, plague demons kissing saints, popes gnawing on bones. You spot one image of death riding a unicycle. It's oddly charming, but it's not all grim. In Florence, you hear tales of artists exploring perspective, human anatomy, and natural light, trying to understand not just how people die, but how they live. You see portraits of real faces, wrinkles and all. A painting of a sleeping woman next to a skull. A fresco of a market scene where everyone is smiling, sort of. You meet a woodcarver in the countryside. He shows you tiny figures carved from oak peasants, sewing lovers embracing a skeleton hiding in a haystack. Balance, he says. Even clothing reflects this shift. Black becomes fashionable, not just for mourning, but for mystery. Embroidery includes hourglasses, grim faces, roses entangled with thorns. You spot a merchant wearing a brooch shaped like a coffin. He winks and says, "Memento mori, friend." You laugh, and maybe shiver a bit. Songs get darker too. Ballads about lost lovers, ghostly bells, fields sown with bones. But also hopeful refrains, verses about rebuilding, about harvests, about love after loss. At a church, you watch a new fresco being painted, Christ not just risen, but laughing. He's sharing bread with a skeleton. The priest shrugs. Hope needs teeth, he says. You leave the painter, his canvas now filled with twirling corpses and saints holding hands. You don't know if it's beautiful or disturbing. Maybe it's both. Like everything now. You wake to shouting in the town square. A group of nobles is huddled beneath a bright banner demanding ordered tradition and something called the proper way of things. You squint. Ah, yes, panic and velvet. The lords are losing control, and they know it. Before the plague, their power rested on land labor and fear. Now, land lies fallow laborers walk away from contracts, and fear's been replaced by something more dangerous expectations. You expect to be paid, to choose where to work, to wear fancy boots without getting arrested. And the nobility, they're trying everything to stuff the genie back into the gilded bottle. Historians still argue whether this backlash was class preservation or sheer desperation. But you've read the proclamations. New laws fix wages at pre-plague levels. Restrictions pop up to keep peasants from moving freely. Some places even forbid certain colors of clothing for common folk. You roll your eyes and buy a saffron scarf. The irony: these rules are impossible to enforce. The labor shortage gives you all the leverage. One widow hires herself out to 3 farms, juggling jobs like a nobleman juggles goblets. A shepherd you know refuses to work for less than double and gets it. Some lords start hiring armed guards. Others form councils to regulate village life. One even installs a curfew bell. You climb the tower and loosen the rope. It tolls at noon. The village cheers. You hear about revolts. In Flanders in Italy, even England. Peasants writing demands, storming manors, burning tax records. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the message spreads. The old world is cracking. One manor tries to reimpose corvée free labor for the lord. The peasants show up, work an hour, then all mysteriously catch shovel fever and collapse. You admire the coordination. Your cousin carves a wooden plaque for his house. It says, "Not a serf anymore." He spells it wrong, but the sentiment is clear. Even the clergy is caught off guard. Bishops remind people to obey their earthly masters. People nod politely and go back to charging 3 coins a day for ditch digging. You meet a noblewoman who's decided to adapt. She opens her estate to tenant farmers, offers fair wages, and stops calling everyone oaf. Her fields thrive. Her peers call her mad. You call her clever. At night, you pass the square again. The noble banner lies trampled in the mud. A pig is chewing the corner. No one tries to stop it. You smile. Some systems don't collapse with fire. They fade away when no one shows up to hold them up. You smell spice before you see the cart. Cinnamon, cloves, pepper aromas, so rich they almost make you forget they were once worth their weight in gold. Now, still pricey, but reachable. Trade is back, and it's rolling into town on creaky wheels, pulled by stubborn mules, and even more stubborn merchants. The plague didn't kill commerce, it just paused it. And now, with routes open again, and ports less haunted, everything is moving goods, people, and unfortunately, rats. Historians still argue whether this resurgence in trade was a renaissance or a relapse. But from your angle, chewing a candied fig while watching a Portuguese sailor flirt with the baker's daughter, it's a little of both. Wool booms first. With fewer people, sheep roam wild, and their fluffy backsides become the backbone of the economy. You help shear one once. It bites you. Still, the cloth sells well. You hear about merchant families in Florence getting rich off Flemish linen, Genoese ships arriving full of dried fish and leaving with barrels of French wine. A man in town claims he saw a leopard in a London dockyard. He probably means a very large cat, but who's to argue? You trade a pair of boots for a bolt of Indian cotton. It smells faintly of camphor and travel. You sew it into a tunic that earns you compliments from a visiting monk and a wink from the innkeeper. Silk makes a comeback too, smuggled dyed, stitched into gowns that float like ghost whispers. You see a young couple walk by, dressed head to toe in imported fabrics. They look absurdly wealthy or very good at bluffing. But here's the catch: trade doesn't just bring luxury, it brings disease. Again, there are murmurs in the taverns, a cough in Venice, a fever in Ragusa, rats jumping ship in Marseille. You freeze, so do others. Still, the markets stay open. People keep buying. Because after everything, after the grave pits and the famine and the fevered prayers, you want to live, to taste something exotic, to wear something absurd, to feel like the world is wider than your field and your fears. One evening, you help unload a spice cart. The merchant hands you a candied date. From Egypt, he says proudly. You take a bite. It's too sweet. You eat the whole thing. You don't mention the rat that scurried under the wheelbarrow. Some things you learn to ignore. You stand at the edge of a hill, the wind tugging at your cloak, staring out over a world that feels different, not better, not healed, but undeniably changed. The fields below ripple with new fences, fresh plantings, and a few oddly straight roads. Someone's trying to plan things now. Smoke rises from rebuilt homes. Children chase goats that don't seem quite as scrawny. A man hammers shingles onto a roof while singing a song you don't recognize. You survive the Black Death. And now, you're surviving everything that came after. There's no grand celebration, no trumpet call announcing the Middle Ages are over. Just small signs. A woman opening a school. A boy selling ink-stained poems. A priest, finally older than 14, preaching mercy over fire and brimstone. Historians still argue whether this was truly a new world or just the old one stitched back together with less feudal thread and more ambition. But you feel the difference. Money flows more freely. Knowledge creeps from cloisters into common rooms. Plows improve. Markets expand. And while superstition still hums in the background, you're also seeing pamphlets, clocks, even a new kind of map with dragons and borders. You meet a traveler from Bruges who's collecting folk tales. You tell him about the dancing skeletons, the ghost town with whispering wells, and the time your neighbor swore at a bishop. He writes it all down. Not everything is brighter, of course. The wounds run deep. Graves still outnumber orchards in many places, and the memory of plague lingers in coughs, in candlelit prayers, in dreams where the air goes still and heavy. But you notice people smiling more, laughing without guilt, risking affection again. Someone hosts a wedding feast with extra ale and slightly undercooked meat. You attend dance badly and eat everything. You still carry garlic on a string and touch wood before entering new towns. But you also hum new songs, sketch ideas in the dirt. Think about planting fruit trees, and maybe, just maybe, you believe tomorrow might be interesting. The wind shifts. Behind you, the road stretches toward memory. Ahead, it twists towards something you don't yet have a word for. You take a step forward, and as you walk, you notice the silence is different now. Less like mourning, more like possibility. You step outside, and for the first time in months, or has it been years, the air smells of parchment and lavender soap instead of ash. There's no fanfare. No one declares it a renaissance. But something is changing. Maybe it starts when a cart trundles into your village, not with plague carts or grain, but with books, dozens of them stacked carefully in wooden crates like precious fruit. They're thinner than you'd imagined. Less Latin, more vernacular. Fewer gold leaf illuminations, more doodled margins. You squint at a page, lips moving softly, and realize you understand it. Sort of. You're not alone. Others gather. An old woman holds the book upside down. A boy reads too fast, stumbling over silent letters. A wandering merchant explains the plot to anyone who'll listen. It's not exactly a university, but it's enough. The man selling them says scribes are everywhere now. Monasteries emptied out. Survivors turn their ink-stained fingers to profit. With fewer clergy around to guard the libraries, books leak into the world like sunlight through cracked shutters. You get the sense that no one planned this. It just happened. Fewer people means fewer rules. With no one to stop you, curiosity becomes a quiet rebellion. Paper is cheaper now. Ink is abundant. And suddenly, that goat hide scroll with weather predictions from 3 decades ago is more valuable than your cousin's wedding robe. Some say it's dangerous. Peasants with ideas mutters a noble as you walk by. Others say it's a waste. Who needs books when there are fields to plow? But historians, those future ones, will whisper that this was the moment literacy began to seep into the cracks of Europe, like moss on old stone. You clutch your book, and imagine what else might be out there. You smell the bathhouse before you see it. No, not in a bad way. For once, the aroma isn't sweat, and something suspicious growing in the corners. It's steam, clean, fragrant steam wafting through town like a scented promise. Someone's added dried herbs to the water. Rosemary, maybe, or thyme. Whatever it is, it smells like hope. And you haven't been this clean since your christening. Because here's the secret no one expected after the Black Death people get weirdly obsessed with bathing. Public bathhouses, once shunned as either decadent or dangerous, are suddenly the new town square. You step inside and it's not just a wash, it's an entire social ecosystem. Friends gossip. Midwives trade herbal concoctions. Local musicians hum lullabies. A baker even does bread deals in the corner flour still on his knuckles. Why now? Partly it's space. With fewer bodies crammed into every hut and alley, people stretch out physically and culturally. They rediscover Roman aqueducts. They reimagine bathing as more than hygiene. It's relaxation, ritual, occasionally romance. You lower yourself into the hot water, wooden tub, hissing faintly. The man beside you mutters something about mineral salts. Another offers you a lump of strange olive-colored soap. You accept it He smiles like he's giving you treasure. Some nobles frown on the trend. Too soft, they say. Peasants aren't supposed to have leisure. But you catch one of them sneaking into the baths at dusk anyway. There's even talk of building heated floors in newer homes. Not castles, actual houses. Because if there's one thing the plague taught everyone, it's that life is short and comfort is no longer a sin. So you lean back, steam rising like a quiet hymn, and smile. You're not just clean, you're reborn. You never thought you'd say this, but you're overwhelmed by chickens. They're everywhere, pecking in your courtyard, roosting under your bench, strutting down the road like they own the place. And maybe they do, because post-plague food animals have outlived their farmers. Which means, for the first time in your life, poultry is less a luxury and more a logistical problem. You remember when eggs were counted like coins. Now, you can't give them away fast enough. Your neighbor tries trading chickens for candles. The blacksmith now accepts hens as partial payment for shoeing a mule. At one point, you catch a boy racing pigeons and betting geese. But this surplus isn't just about animals, it's about opportunity. You finally have the time and resources to experiment. What happens if you raise your chickens indoors during winter, or feed them leftover barley porridge instead of scraps? You're not a scientist technically, but that doesn't stop you from building a tiny hatchery behind your shed. Markets adjust in odd ways. Town criers announce Feather Fair Wednesdays. Monks start preserving eggs in ash and salt. One eccentric noble even publishes a recipe book, 50 uses for fowl. Still, it's not all sunshine and clucking. You begin to understand the phrase, too much of a good thing, as roosters duel under your bed at dawn. And your attempt to turn feathers into mattress stuffing ends in a sneezing fit that lasts 4 days. Yet underneath the poultry chaos is something deeper. For the first time, small folk like you are choosing how to eat, how to trade, how to live, and that power. It tastes better than roasted capon on a feast day. So you step outside, gently shoo a chicken from your boots, and smile at your ridiculous feathery fortune. You spot it in the corner of the merchant's stall, a slim, unassuming book with a red linen cover and no clasp. No gold leaf, no wax seal. Just stitched parchment and a handwritten title you can actually read. That's what stops you cold, because until now, books were fortress things, chained to monastery shelves, whispered over by scholars, written in languages you only heard during Mass. But this one is in your tongue. You pick it up with trembling fingers. No one stops you. You half expect a priest to appear in a puff of incense and snatch it away. Instead, the merchant nods. "Copper coin," he says, casual, like it's a sack of turnips. Here's the strange part. Books are getting cheaper. With the sudden surge in scribes for hire and fewer abbeys controlling the flow, books are quietly flooding into hands like yours. The printing press hasn't even happened yet, but the hand-copied book market is booming in its own chaotic way, and it's not just saints' lives or legal codes anymore. You see books of herbal remedies, joke collections, travel journals filled with clumsy maps, even a manual on cheese storage, which, if you're being honest, is exactly the kind of practical content you never knew you needed. Children start learning their letters by copying recipes. Housewives swap notes on grain rot and marriage prayers. That neighbor who used to throw rocks at cats She's now quoting Ovid, poorly, but still. Some grumble that literacy breeds rebellion. Others fear heresy. Too much reading, a magistrate mutters, one day leads to too many opinions. But deep down, even he probably has a poetry scroll tucked behind his ledger. You walk home, book hugged tight to your chest. You can't read it all yet, but you will. And that changes everything. He arrives with no shoes and a bag of chalk. Not exactly what you'd expect from someone calling himself a professor, but beggars can't be choosers, especially when the village priest still confuses verbs mid-sermon and the nearest university is 3 weeks away by mule. The wandering teacher sets up under the old elm near the bakery. No classroom, no desks, just a cleared patch of dirt and a crude board propped against a wheelbarrow. But within days, a circle forms, children, curious elders, even the blacksmith's apprentice all watching as he scrawls the alphabet like it's a spell. He doesn't just teach Latin prayers or noble history. He explains the stars, talks about different kinds of rain, demonstrates how to count sheep in multiples of 7. Though the shepherd swears he already knew that one. It's not official. There's no tuition, just chicken's bread and the occasional warm blanket offered in thanks. But the effect is astonishing. You watch a 10-year-old argue over the order of planets. You see a weaver recite a psalm by memory without fumbling. The local widow corrects the teacher's spelling one afternoon, and everyone claps. Why now? Because monasteries are emptier, their surviving scholars scattered. Education once hoarded behind stone, and silence is now makeshift mobile and weirdly contagious. Not everyone approves. The mayor calls it mud learning. A suspicious noble asks if he's training rebels, but most just appreciate the novelty of knowing things for no reason. It's a kind of luxury you didn't realize existed. You stay after class one day tracing letters in the dust with your finger. The teacher watches you. "You'll be writing your own book soon," he says. You laugh, but part of you wonders, what if he's right? You wake up to a sound you haven't heard in weeks clacking. Not horses or hammers. This is the soft, rhythmic thump of a loom echoing through narrow streets like a heartbeat. And it's not coming from a guild hall or a merchant's mill. It's coming from your neighbor's front room. In post-plague towns, everything has shifted, including work. The bustling centers, once crowded with textile workers, have thinned out, leaving their looms behind. And now, with fewer mouths to feed and more space to breathe, families start bringing industry home. You poke your head into the doorway. A mother weaves while her youngest naps beside the spindle. Her husband spins wool, and their older daughter boils dye from walnuts and onion skins. The whole room smells faintly of warm linen and stew. Guilds used to control every thread literally, but now, with their ranks thinned and regulations wavering, people reclaim the craft. Decentralized textile production. Future historians will call it. You call it the living room turned factory. And it's not just cloth. You see families cobbling shoes, brewing ale, carving combs. Backyard industries flourish like spring weeds. Not every town approves. Some guilds try to reassert control. But enforcement is tricky when half the enforcers are gone or too busy learning to weave themselves. Trade changes too. Instead of shipping bolts of cloth to big cities, people trade directly between villages. Your cousin makes a killing selling indigo-dyed scarves 3 towns over. You try your hand at embroidery, botch a tulip, and declare it abstract. The clacking gets louder as more homes join in. It's not chaos, it's rhythm. A new way of living stitched together one thread at a time. You sit down at your borrowed loom thread, the shuttle, and smile. It's not art yet, but it's yours. You tilt your head in church. Did the priest just say that in plain French? He stumbles a bit, skips a syllable, here invents a verb there. But he's trying, and you actually understand him for once. It's strange. Not miraculous strange, but unthinkable a year ago. The old priest would have called it heresy to hear Mass in anything but Latin. Now the new one speaks like your cousin from the next village over. What changed everything? With so many clergy lost to the plague, seminaries rush to ordain new recruits. Literacy takes a hit. Latin fluency takes a bigger one. And so sermons become simpler, shorter, sometimes funny, occasionally wrong, but oddly human. One Sunday, a friar attempts a joke about St. Jerome and a donkey. You laugh, not because it's good, but because it's recognizable. This is a sermon you could repeat over bread later, which you do. And it's not just sermons. Prayer books begin to circulate in the vernacular. Children learn the Lord's Prayer in their mother tongue. Confessionals become less terrifying when the priest doesn't need a translator. Some scribes even start translating psalms into local rhymes. Blasphemy shout a few bishops. Helpful say the grandmothers who finally know what they're singing. But the change brings tension too. Church elders debate furiously. If peasants can read scripture, one grumbles what next interpret it. Historians still argue whether this early drift away from Latin planted seeds for later religious reform, or if it was just a desperate improvisation. You don't know about doctrine. You just know that for the first time, the words feel like they belong to you. You leave Mass humming a hymn in your own language. The words may not be perfect, but they're yours. And that's a miracle of its own. You're supposed to become an apprentice. That's the plan. Your uncle arranges it. Your aunt packs you cheese, and the town carpenter agrees to teach you how not to slice your own fingers off. Solid career. Predictable. But then you meet a man in the market selling tiny scrolls. He wears a cloak with stars stitched into it and speaks in riddles. One scroll claims to reveal the hour of your death. Another promises to predict the gender of chickens. You're skeptical, but also curious, because post-plague Europe isn't just rebuilding, it's daydreaming. And while traditional trades are booming again, there's a quieter renaissance of wonder bubbling at the edges. Astrology, alchemy, strange geometry, all drifting between curiosity and commerce. Schools adapt. Trade guilds begin teaching numeracy alongside how to sharpen a chisel. A traveling glassblower offers lessons in scientific observation that mostly involve staring at bubbles. You overhear someone using the word experiment in a sentence that doesn't end with burned barn. Itinerant teachers carry astrological charts alongside carpentry manuals. You torn between becoming a skilled artisan or decoding star signs, do both by carving planetary symbols into the side of your tool chest. Some scholars frown at the mingling of science and superstition. Real learning, they say, belongs in monasteries, not marketplaces. Others argue this messy blend is precisely how progress starts. Historians still debate whether these post-plague pursuits sparked true scientific shifts or simply filled emotional gaps. But you like not knowing. You study woodworking by day, then sit by the fire decoding your scroll's lunar calendar. You still don't believe it can tell you when to plant onions based on Mars. But your onions are thriving. And maybe, just maybe, you're learning something useful from the stars after all. It's quiet inside the walls of the monastery. Too quiet, maybe, but not empty. You tiptoe past rows of planters overflowing with mint, sage, marigold, and lavender. The air smells like someone spilled a spice cabinet into a rain barrel, and the only sound is bees. Post-plague. These monastic gardens have become something different. Less ornamental, more intentional. Once places of contemplation, they're now also laboratories, apothecaries, and unofficially therapy centers for tired souls like you. Brother Aldrich greets you with dirt under his fingernails and a half-plucked rosemary sprig in his hand. He doesn't ask why you're here. He hands you a spade. You dig alongside him, unbothered by silence. He names the plants as you uncover them. Valerian for sleep, he says. Yarrow for wounds. Chamomile for grieving. You nod, unsure whether you're learning medicine or poetry. There are no lectures here, just slow rhythm. Watering, harvesting, mixing. You help him paste ground sage into vinegar. He explains it might quell a hot humor. You don't ask which one you just sip. And it's not just monks doing this. Across the countryside, herbal knowledge once hoarded by religious orders leaks gently into village life. Midwives begin cultivating their own patches. Grandmothers swap recipes for mint poultices. Children collect wildflowers not for bouquets, but for tinctures. Some priests grumble. Folk healing is a step toward paganism, they say, but they accept Brother Aldrich's time wine when their throat hurts and mutter thanks with red noses and sheepish smiles. Historians still argue whether these gardens led directly to early modern medicine or were just a comforting side effect of catastrophe. You only know that here among the petals and peat, your heart finally slows. You pluck a calendula bloom and tuck it behind your ear. You think you'll come back tomorrow. You never thought a chair could feel smug. But here it is, wide-legged, low-seated, and clearly proud of the angled board nailed across its front legs. A book rest. The carpenter says it's called a reading stool. You call it revolutionary. Because these days, people aren't just acquiring books, they're building furniture around them. It starts subtly. A shelf here, a candle holder welded to the wall. But soon, entire corners of homes transform into reading nooks, a term you've never heard before, but now say like it's always existed. Pillows multiply. Blankets become permanent installations. One noble installs a glass window glass just to catch reading light at dusk. And while the rich install purpose-built studies, you and your neighbors innovate. One woman converts her grain bin into a tiny reading alcove. A tailor stitches pockets into tunics for carrying parchment scraps. Children build scroll forts. You remember when books were too sacred to touch, let alone casually prop open with a stone. Now, you see volumes balanced on knees, shelves carved with tiny animal motifs, benches with drawers full of bookmarks, feathers mostly. It's not just about the furniture. It's about claiming space for thought, for rest, for imagination. Historians will later study these odd early reading corners as signs of rising literacy and domestic comfort. Some call it proto-humanism, others simply living smarter. You just know that curling up with a book on a cold morning feels better than most feast days. Today, you sand down your own reading stool humming as you work. You even carve a little owl on the leg, your personal emblem of wisdom, or at least nocturnal confusion. When it's done, you sit down, open your book, and exhale. No one taught you to build a library. You're just doing it anyway. It starts with a pigeon landing on your roof carrying a ribbon. Not a message, not a scroll, just a ribbon blue and slightly frayed, like a leftover from someone's festival costume. It flutters down and lands in your stew pot, and just like that, you're part of a new information network. Because post-plague, when people finally begin to move again, they bring with them not just goods, but gossip. And in the absence of official heralds and crumbling clerical networks, villages invent their own communication systems. Carrier pigeons take flight, traded and trained by boys who used to chase them for fun. Makeshift signposts sprout along crossroads, wood planks scrawled with charcoal updates like "Good turnips here" or "Mill open briefly." Quilters begin stitching coded symbols into blankets hung at market stalls, today's gossip sewn in wool. And the town square. It's no longer just for bread and bribes. It's a buzzing, clucking, whispering hub. Someone plays a lute off-key while debating the king's latest decree. A farmer swears he saw a comet again. You overhear 3 different explanations for a neighbor's sudden wealth, none of which involve farming. One woman sets up a weekly news stall where she repeats whatever she's heard dramatically for a small fee. People adore it. You go every Thursday. Some towns resist. Idle chatter, the mayor grumbles, leads to panic. But even he leans out his window during market hour, pretending to inspect cabbages. Historians later debate whether these early rumor networks foreshadowed modern journalism. Others think they were simply ways to fill the silence. You write your own news, once chalked it on a gate baker's cat speaks Latin. You still deny it was you. But deep down, you're proud. Because even in a fractured world, you're learning to listen again. And to speak. You've never slept this well in your life. It's not that the world is fixed. Far from it. But for the first time, fear isn't the thing dragging you to bed. It's comfort. Actual, legitimate, blissful comfort. And sleep long, uninterrupted, glorious sleep is becoming a quiet revolution. Before the plague, your bed was a pile of straw, maybe a blanket, and a perpetual draft. Now, you've added 2 pillows, a feather-stuffed bolster, and a thick wool coverlet gifted by an uncle who survived 3 pandemics and claims sleep is the only real medicine. And he might be right. Because across post-plague Europe, people are suddenly treating sleep like treasure. Naps during midday. Double sleep, 1 in the evening, 1 after midnight. You've even heard of a baker who schedules dreams like baking times, precise and slightly burnt if ignored. You notice beds becoming heirlooms, quilts pass between generations, herbal sachets stitched into mattress seams. One widow swears by lavender-stuffed pillowcases and refuses to get out of bed before the second rooster crow. The shift isn't just physical, it's cultural. People speak about dreams now, share them, interpret them over breakfast. Monks write about rest as sacred rhythm. Historians later call it the sleep renaissance, which sounds grander than it felt. But they're not wrong. There's even debate among village thinkers. Is sleep more important than prayer, than bread? One poet argues that to dream is to commune with God minus the sermon. You try it. You nap in the middle of the day, fan humming breeze soft through the shutters. You dream of books and chickens and a reading stool with wings. And when you wake, the world feels gentler. You feel human. Turns out, building a better life sometimes starts with building a better bed. You flip the page and snort. Someone, probably the baker's son, has drawn a monk kissing a goat in the margin of your borrowed book. It's crude, ridiculous, and inexplicably perfect. You try not to laugh too loud, but a wheeze slips out anyway. Because here's the secret of the post-plague world. When everything feels fragile, humor becomes sacred. Books aren't just repositories of holy texts and serious treatises anymore. They're becoming living objects full of personality. Doodles creep into corners. Notes fill the margins. Someone adds a recipe for eel pie next to a sermon on fasting. Another records a dream about flying sheep. It's not vandalism, it's collaboration. You start doing it too. At first, just dots for emphasis, then a face, then a bad pun. Before long, you're slipping jokes between the lines of your own journal. You never meant to become a writer, but here you are crafting sonnets about moldy cheese and love letters to your stool. Scribes begin adding little jokes into copied texts. Recipes are traded alongside riddles. Children collect misheard proverbs on parchment scraps. A rolling pig gathers no monks reads one. You can't explain why it's funny. It just is. Even serious scholars start relaxing. If knowledge cannot wear a smile, one famously writes, then it wears a frown too tight. Historians still debate whether these marginalia signal cultural resilience or simple mischief. Some argue both. Monks grow oddly fond of this literary chaos. They catalog it, preserve it. One abbot even pens a whole manuscript on Holy Writ, though it reads more like a dad joke collection. You finish the page and scribble a joke of your own beside the goat monk or milkmaid. Results unclear. And for a moment, the world feels lighter, like maybe laughter is its own kind of literacy. Your calendar is a mess, not in the chaotic, ink-blotted, double-booked way. No, this is something stranger. The days feel different. Tuesdays don't mean what they used to. Festivals have slid around like spilled soup. And you're not entirely sure if Lent started last Wednesday or next Thursday. Because after the plague, people don't just rebuild lives, they rethink time. Old saints' days are repurposed. New local holidays spring up to honor surviving villages. Miracle cows, or that one cobbler who fed 50 people with 2 stale loaves. You hear rumors of Thankful Thursdays and Feast of the Last Rat. Someone in the next town starts a sunrise dance every equinox. Church calendars try to hold firm, but with so many clergy gone, the dates blur. A priest in a nearby village celebrates Easter twice in the same month. No one complains. They just enjoy the bonus bread. You begin noticing more markers of time outside of officialdom. Painted stones to track moon phases. Quilted banners with family birthdays. A chalkboard in the town square listing feast days, market days, and maybe festival. Some families invent private observances. Your cousin lights a candle every month on the day she first smelled fresh bread again. You start marking the first frost with a hot wine toast and a terrible song. Scholars argue whether this marks a loss of centralized timekeeping or the birth of something beautifully human. Time becomes elastic, local, gentle. You look at your wall. A hand-drawn calendar decorated with ink chickens and a reminder nap day circled in red. You're not sure what day of the week it is, but it's the day you needed, and that for now is enough. It starts with a whisper. Someone in your village says, "We should meet again next week." Same place, same time. And just like that, something fragile and new begins. You show up with a book. They bring wine. Someone else reads aloud, while a cat purrs across their lap. You've accidentally invented a library club. Not a formal one. No dues, no rules, no titles. Just people, farmers, widows, teenagers, scribes, gathering in a warm room. To listen to, share, to feel, connected. For once, it's not about surviving. It's about reflecting. One evening, the weaver reads a passage from a travel journal about seas you'll never see. Another night, the baker brings a book of jokes and misquotes it gloriously. No one corrects him. Everyone laughs. Loudly. Books pass between hands like bread. You see marginal notes grow into dialogues. "Nice metaphor," one says. Another replies, "Thanks, it was stolen." You add a line of your own and feel oddly proud. Soon more show up. The room spills over. Someone builds a bench. Another donates a candle chandelier. You never intended to start anything. But what once was quiet recovery now becomes shared culture. Scholars of the future will debate when rebuilding turned into Renaissance. Was it the return of trade? The rise of cities? The invention of something loud and official? Or was it here in a village hall where someone read poetry while soup simmered? You don't have answers, just warmth, words, and the growing sense that even after plague, even after grief, something better is blooming. You look around the circle. Familiar faces, familiar stories. And for the first time in forever, the silence between sentences feels full, not empty. Maybe this is the world you've been waiting to live in. Maybe you've helped build it. You can't believe it's actually happening. A feast, an actual, honest-to-goodness, everyone's invited village feast. No funerals attached, no whispered prayers for survival, just laughter lanterns and more roasted root vegetables than should logically fit on a single table. You don't remember the last time people gathered like this. Maybe a wedding 2 years ago, right before the world tilted sideways. Since then, meals have been quiet, purposeful, and let's be honest, grim. But tonight there's music, mismatched plates, and someone definitely not sober trying to roast turnips on a stick like marshmallows. It starts with small things. A farmer donates extra barley. A widow offers dried apples. Someone finds a keg of ale that outlived its owner. The mayor, in a rare moment of public joy, declares, "We feast at sundown. Bring what you can, or just bring yourself." And so you do. The meal isn't fancy, but it feels enchanted. Children chase each other between tables. Elders toast to the absurd miracle of still being here. A traveling tinker sings 3 verses of a song you suspect he's making up as he goes. There are no banners, no ceremony, just food people, and a fragile sort of joy no one dares name too loudly. Yet everyone understands it. This feast isn't about wealth or ritual, it's about breath, shared space, the permission to smile without guilt. Historians might overlook it. No records, no royal decrees. But in this moment, surrounded by warmth and stew, you know this is the true beginning of your village's second life. Someone hands you a bowl. Someone else pours cider. And for the first time in a long, long while, you take, you eat, and you laugh. You hear it before you see him. A fiddle, slightly off-key, trills across the field like a bird that forgot how to land. Then comes the drum, a hollow bouncing beat played on a barrel lid. You follow the sound until you find him, a wandering musician, wrapped in a patchwork cloak, perched atop a cart, playing as if the sky itself needed cheering up. Music has returned. Before the plague, traveling performers were everywhere. Minstrels with bawdy songs, flute players weaving through markets, groups of singers telling legends in rhyme. Then came silence. Streets emptied. Instruments lay still. Festivals vanished. But now you notice the sound creeping back. Not in grand concert halls, those were never really for your kind anyway, but in doorways, crossroads, and barns. The music is a little rusty sometimes, mournful, often absurd, but it's alive. Children dance awkwardly. A grandmother claps off-beat. Someone sings all the wrong lyrics with too much confidence. It's perfect. Musicians adapt too. Without wealthy patrons, they trade tunes for supper. One fiddler offers lullabies in exchange for firewood. A drum duo accepts old boots and half a pie. You give a mandolin player a scarf, and he composes a ballad about your left eyebrow. You're flattered, mostly. Not everyone welcomes the noise. It's frivolous, grumbles a cloth merchant. Better to rebuild walls than waste time on songs. But most folks disagree. Music fills spaces that bricks can't. Some scholars later suggest this return to communal song marked a cultural healing more effective than any doctrine or decree. Others say it was just background noise. But you know better. As you hum a tune on your way home, the air feels warmer, more forgiving. Your village isn't just surviving anymore. It's starting to sing again. You blink at the new calendar pinned beside the mill door. It's clearly homemade bits of parchment stitched together ink, smudged decorative doodles in the margins. But what stops you isn't the artistry, it's the dates. None of them make sense. Feast of the Thankful Bucket, 14th of Second Sprout, St. Margot's Day of the Miraculous Loaf, Tide's Day month of nearly summer. You turn to the miller. Is this real? He shrugs. It is now. With so many official feast days forgotten or misplaced along with the clerics who once announced them, villages start inventing their own, not out of rebellion, just out of need. The rhythms of life still crave markers, so you begin naming them. A neighbor declares Third Sunday of Bread to commemorate when she baked for 30 people in one oven. Another insists on honoring St. Crispin's cat, though no one agrees whether the cat was ever canonized or even real. Children create holidays on the fly. Sleep-in Day, Upside Down Hat Day. No logic, just joy. Some traditions stick, others vanish. But the important thing is that time feels festive again, not just punctuated by toil or mourning, but dotted with absurdity and warmth. Local musicians adapt. Bakers theme their loaves. Someone paints a mural for the festival of slightly burned onions, which historians later mistake for an agricultural rite. The church, once uneasy, slowly leans in. A younger priest joins the garlic parade with surprising enthusiasm. All joy is divine, he says while riding a wheelbarrow. You mark your own calendar with charcoal today, Ikpui candle jam. No one knows what that means yet. But when dusk falls, the square lights up with tiny flames, homemade treats, and giggling. Turns out making up holidays might be the most human thing you've ever done. You tie ribbons around your ankles. Not because it's practical, not because it's fashion, because tonight is the harvest circle, and everyone's dancing ribbons, bare feet, mismatched scarves and all. It's not quite the chant you remember. The old festival steps were formal, dictated by season and saint. But this is something else. It starts with a few claps, a fiddle tune, a stomp, and then suddenly, everyone's in motion, spiraling, laughing, crying a little too, but no one minds. After the plague, dancing has changed. It's no longer about elegance or entertainment. It's about marking life. Movement becomes memory. One step for survival, two for someone lost, a twirl for what comes next. The dances are invented on the spot. One involves pretending to milk an invisible cow. Another mimics swatting flies while balancing bread on your head. A child choreographs a puddle jig that becomes surprisingly popular. But beneath the silliness, there's depth. These dances say what words can't. They honor crops returned, neighbors, recovered time, reclaimed. One widow always opens the evening by tapping her cane 3 times on the ground, once for each son she lost. Everyone joins her rhythm. Some travelers scoff. This isn't tradition, they say. It's chaos. But you disagree. You're watching something ancient being born in real time. Historians later refer to this as symbolic folk movement or post-plague kinetic ritualism. You call it joy with dirty feet. As the music swells, someone grabs your hand. You don't know the steps. No one does. That's the point. You leap into the circle, ribbons flying, heart pounding. And for a moment, time forgets how to be heavy. He shows up wearing a carrot hat. That's your first clue that the village fool is back, not a metaphor, but the actual title. Before the plague, he was considered frivolous. After it, he's become essential. You remember him vaguely, a gangly man with a knack for puns and the remarkable ability to fall off a barrel without spilling his ale. But now, he performs with something deeper behind the grin. He juggles turnips? Sure. But between the gags, he slips in lines that hush the crowd. Did you hear the one about grief? It walks into a tavern, drinks quietly, and pays for everyone else's sorrow. No one laughs at that one. And yet, you all feel better. Because the village fool, once a sideshow, has become a kind of counselor. His jokes disarm. His stories help you name the things you still can't speak aloud. When a merchant bursts into tears mid-market, it's the fool who sits beside him and says, "That's just the rain leaking through the eyes." Children adore him. Elders tolerate him. Some clergy frown at his theology of giggles, but even they chuckle when he impersonates the bishop using a cabbage and two sticks. He creates rituals that make no sense, but somehow matter. Cluck Day, when everyone speaks like chickens. Hat Reversal Hour, where you tell someone something true only while wearing your bonnet backward. Historians later label this resurgence as therapeutic satire. Others call it proto-theater. But for you, he's just the one person in town who gives everyone permission to laugh and grieve in the same breath. He bows low. One evening, trips over his own shoe and lands in your soup. You clap loudly. Because tonight, laughter feels like liturgy. The lanterns come out before the sun disappears. First, a few flickers, tiny oil lamps swinging from broom handles and crooked sticks. Then a string of glowing jars along the bakery wall. Someone lights a beeswax torch inside a hollowed turnip. Soon the village square is transformed into a golden constellation, humming gently beneath the indigo sky. Tonight is story night. No script, no stage. Just voices and shadows, warm drink in hand, and a quiet agreement to share whatever lives inside your chest. The butcher tells a ghost tale with too many goats. A child recites a dream where chickens wear shoes and dance. Then it's your turn. You begin nervous reading from a wrinkled page. But as the story unfolds about an old healer and a river that remembers you, forget your fear. People lean in. Someone gasps. Someone else mutters yes under their breath. After the plague, when words were mostly prayers or warnings, this kind of storytelling feels like magic. You're not begging for mercy or listing symptoms. You're building worlds, stitching language into comfort. Lantern-lit gatherings spread. Villages set aside special nights, some weekly, others by moon phase. You hear of entire hamlets that settle disputes through poetry duels. One town elects its mayor based on bedtime tales. It's not all perfect. Occasionally, someone nods off mid-story and snores like a kettle. Another insists every tale needs a dragon. But no one minds. Scholars will later call this oral resilience culture. But you just call it Thursday. The fire crackles. A new voice begins. You lean back, lantern glowing soft beside you. And in the hush between stories, you feel more human than you have in years. You inhale, and the air smells sweet. Not cloying like perfume or too ripe apples, something warmer. Spiced, toasted. You follow the scent through winding streets until you arrive at the baker's door, where a tray of golden little cakes cools beside a bowl of honey. After the plague, the return of sweetness feels almost suspicious. For years, sugar and spice were hoarded, reserved for feasts you never celebrated or nobles you never met. But now, with fewer mouths to feed and more forgotten pantries, rediscovered the recipes come back. Slowly, tenderly. People unearth old cooking manuscripts. Grandmothers remember a cake for saints, a tart for the harvest, a bun for being alive. Ingredients: change nutmeg, replaced with sage, sugar, thinned with cider. But the intent remains joy baked into a crust. You try making your own. It flops, but no one cares. Your neighbor says your burnt crust tastes like bravery. You laugh and pass her the corner piece anyway. Soon sweet things become central to every gathering. A caramel pudding appears at the end of a wake. Sticky buns are traded for stories. A child invents a festival called Day of the Strawberry Pie, and somehow it sticks. The kitchen becomes a laboratory of memory. You collect honeycomb. You grind walnuts into paste. You borrow cinnamon from a passing trader and feel just for a moment richer than a lord. Some clerics raise eyebrows. Frivolity, they mutter. But even they linger longer when cake is served after evening prayers. You bite into a still warm almond tart and blink back tears. Not because it's perfect, because it tastes like something was healed. You close your eyes. Sweetness has returned, and so have you. Your neighbor walks by wearing bright green trousers and a red embroidered vest. It's a Tuesday. You blink, unsure whether it's a costume or a declaration. Then you catch your reflection in the window. Patched cloak, faded browns and grays, a lifetime of soot-colored clothing, and suddenly you feel behind. Because something unexpected has crept into village life color. After years of black, brown, and mourning garb, people are dressing like joy. It begins with a scarf. A widow dyes hers blue, with crushed berries for no reason at all. Then someone wears yellow on a cloudy day. Then someone else adds floral patterns to their apron. At first, it seems random. Then it becomes a habit. People begin experimenting. Natural dyes are rediscovered, traded, improved. Onion skins beetroot lichen from the stone wall behind the barn. Your cousin teaches you how to boil walnut hulls for a surprisingly noble brown. You trade her a bundle of crimson cloth made with madder root. Clothing becomes storytelling. Embroidery returns stitched with tiny symbols, stars, wheat stalks, initials of the lost hopes for the next harvest. One man paints the hem of his tunic with little fish. He won't say why. You don't ask. Festivals amplify it, but even on ordinary days, especially on ordinary days, people wear their brightest. Historians call it psychological recovery. You call it finally feeling visible again. One night, you hem your own cloak with gold thread from a rescued spool. Just a border, just enough. You wear it the next morning and someone smiles before you even say a word. Turns out, healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just choosing crimson over gray. You hang a sprig of rosemary above your door. It's not fancy. Just a handful tied with thread and crooked slightly to the left. You don't know if it wards off illness evil or awkward neighbors, but it feels right. And in this strange, blossoming world, small gestures carry weight. Across town, someone ties a red ribbon to every fence post. Another carves tiny suns into their window shutters. You start noticing these things. Everywhere bundles of herbs. In kitchens, tiny bells hanging from eaves. Chalk symbols drawn beside thresholds. None of it is official. All of it is deliberate. These aren't superstitions in the old, fearful sense. They're new traditions, born not from fear, but from meaning. From the desire to shape a day, mark a moment, and say I was here. I felt something. You join in. You begin to leave pebbles in your bread basket, one for each good dream. Your neighbor gives out dried flowers wrapped in cloth just because. Someone invents a game where every gift must be smaller than a spoon, but still meaningful. You receive a walnut shell filled with lavender. You keep it in your pocket for weeks. There are no rules, only rhythms. Some gifts are practical. A stitched pouch of salt, a candle stub. Others are inexplicable. a feather tied to a twig, a poem about moss. No one judges. That's not the point. Historians later struggled to categorize these behaviors. Folk response, some say. Symbolic resilience, say others. You just call it living with tenderness. One day, a child gives you a painted stone. It says nothing. It says everything. You place it beside your rosemary. The wind stirs, and you feel a little more whole. Someone sets a rope down in the square. No explanation, no rules. Just a rope coiled like a question. Within minutes, two children pick it up and begin the world's slowest, silliest tug of war. An onlooker joins, then another. Soon you're holding the rope yourself, laughing harder than you have in months, as the other team pretends to lose dramatically. And just like that, games are back. Not just for children, not just for feast days, but for everyone, every day. Because after surviving so much, the village seems to agree play is not frivolous. It's necessary. You see it everywhere. A stone skipping contest breaks out near the well. Someone starts a weekly riddle circle with the prize being bragging rights and one ripe pear. The weaver challenges the blacksmith to a game of pinch the bean, which no one understands but everyone enjoys. Old games resurface Skittles dice and guess the animal from behind. New ones emerge too improvised with whatever's nearby, bones buttons, windblown leaves. Even the serious folk participate. A gruff merchant claims not to care, but you catch him chalking a hopscotch grid at dawn. The priest pretends to scold a ring toss game, then quietly plays it once everyone leaves. The best part, no one's keeping score, or if they are, it doesn't matter. The joy is in the doing. Some call it communal recreation, others ritual levity. You call it what it is. Proof that life is not just about surviving, it's about delighting. One evening, someone dares you to join a foot race while balancing an egg on a spoon, while reciting a poem. You say no, then yes. You lose terribly, and it's still the best night of your week. You hear the rain before you see it, and then you hear the song. Not a chant, not a hymn. A song. About the weather. About this exact drizzle, in fact. Sung by three neighbors in loose harmony as they walk past, carrying buckets and laughing like the sky is in on the joke. It's not the first time. Lately, every shift in the wind has its own melody. A breeze picks up, and someone hums a leaf-lifting lullaby. Thunder rumbles, and children launch into a rhythm of stomps and claps they swear was passed down from a traveling goat whisperer. This new habit turning weather into music isn't formal or organized. It's instinctual, a collective way of marking moments no calendar ever will. Soon, each type of rain has a different tune. Good planting. Rain is slow and deep. Storm that might ruin laundry is frantic and mostly shouted. Rain that sounds like applause is everyone's favorite, a soft round sung while watching puddles fill. You catch yourself doing it too. A low whistle during fog, a tap on your knee when the snow falls sideways. You don't even think about it anymore. Some villages turn this into performance. They host weather concerts where the only instruments are buckets, boots, and whatever the sky's doing. A boy from the next town writes an entire ode to dampness performed on lute and empty cider jugs. It's terrible. You love it. Scholars later marvel at this phenomenon. They call it environmental music ritualization. You just know that it makes cloudy days feel lighter. You hum softly as you patch a roof. And when the sun peeks out, unexpected shy, you sing a single bright note. Someone down the road echoes it. And just like that, the village is smiling in the rain. It starts with a cart and a curtain. No stage, no scripts. Just four villagers, a hand-painted backdrop, and a makeshift puppet made from a turnip. They set up in the middle of the square and declare with heroic confidence, "Tonight, the tragedy of Sir Bloop and the enchanted sausage." You stay. Of course you stay. Because traveling theater is back, and it's weirder and more wonderful than ever. Before the plague plays were rare events. Troops toured big cities. Performances were formal, often religious, sometimes noble funded. Now, it's whoever can carry a cart and remember a few lines. And you love it. Every village starts building its own stage, from whatever they can find: barrels, crates, old doors propped against trees. Someone in your town converts a hay cart into a moving platform. They call it the grand rolling stage, even though the wheels only work going downhill. The stories are anything but polished. Scripts are scrawled on the backs of receipts. Roles are swapped mid-performance. One night, your local baker plays both a wizard and a goose. His costume change involves a feather and panic. It's perfect. Plays blur genres. The tragedy of the lost spoon turns into a musical halfway through. Lady Parsnip's secret becomes a comedy because the lead actor forgets all her lines and makes up rhymes instead. And yet there's power here. You laugh, you cry, you yell suggestions from the crowd, you help paint sets and fetch props. You forget for an hour or two that the world ever broke. Some travelers scoff. It's not real theater, they say. But you disagree. It's the realest thing you've seen in years. One night they ask for volunteers. You step forward. Your role, mysterious tree number 3. You nail it, and for the first time in a long time, you take a bow. You wake up humming a tune you didn't know you knew. It's soft, familiar, and somehow older than you are, like a thread pulled from the edge of a dream. You hum it while stirring porridge. You whistle it while feeding chickens. And when your neighbor passes by, she joins in without missing a beat. You too, she asks, because it's happening all over town, songs resurfacing. Not grand ballads or church hymns, though those return too, but the quiet kind. Lullabies, spinning songs, work chants, melodies, once sung to babies now grown. The kind of music stored deep in the bones, not in books. At first, no one remembers where they came from. Then someone digs out an old scarf embroidered with lyrics. Another finds a torn corner of parchment with a single verse. You recall your grandmother singing about butter that dances in its churn. You finish the tune. Someone adds a harmony. Soon you're sharing them intentionally. Evening gatherings turn into low-voiced concerts. You swap songs like stories like gifts. A mason teaches a mortar-setting chant. A shepherd offers a dawn song that's mostly whistling and sheep noises. It's oddly beautiful. Children create new ones, of course. Songs about worms and weather and sneaking extra sweets. Their melodies are nonsense. Their choruses get stuck in your head for days. And not all the songs are happy. Some carry grief. A mother sings softly of the shoes left by the door. You weep quietly. She does too. Then she teaches you the second verse. Historians later describe this as a cultural reweaving through oral tradition. But you just think of it as remembering. You hum your morning tune again as the sun rises. And this time, it feels like it's always been yours. You find yourself holding a ribbon, not a decorative one, not for your hair or your tunic. This one's for tying a wreath to a gate. A wreath made of dried herbs, tiny acorns, and bits of colored cloth. It's not to celebrate anything in particular. It's to remember. Because in this new world, celebration and remembrance have become tangled in the same garland. After the feast comes a moment of silence. After the laughter, someone lights a candle and whispers a name. You've seen it everywhere, joy carefully threaded through memory, not to bury it, but to make space for it. The festivals you once knew return in unfamiliar ways. They're quieter, gentler. The harvest dance ends with everyone placing a grain of wheat into a shared bowl. The midsummer fire now includes a song about what was lost. A child's birthday party pauses for a toast to the ones who didn't grow old. You help organize one of these days. No banner, no speech. Just food flowers, a chalk circle in the square. People bring objects, a button, a sock, a half-written letter. They place them in the circle. Not to forget, but to remember together. Some say it's too sad. Others say it's the only way forward. You begin to understand that these are not contradictions. Grief and gratitude are now neighbors. Celebration is not a rejection of the past. It's an invitation for it to walk beside you softly. You tie the ribbon to the wreath and hang it gently on the gate. It flutters in the wind. A reminder that joy and loss can live in the same breath and still taste like hope. There's no music playing this morning, no feast scheduled, no reason to gather. It's just a normal day. Gray sky, cool breeze, the scent of baked oats drifting from the mill house. And yet, as you step outside, something feels different. You smile before anything happens. Not because someone told you to. Not because it's a festival or a holy day. Simply because life now holds joy in its corners, even the quiet ones. Post-plague, your village has learned something remarkable. Celebration doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need a reason. It can live in your walk to the well, in the pattern you stitch into a handkerchief, in the way you hum to your goat for no audience at all. A boy waves at you just because. A woman sets a pear on your doorstep without a note. You see three friends sharing soup at the edge of the road, laughing about absolutely nothing. Daily joy, once reserved for survival's aftermath, now simply is. You still light candles for the lost. You still remember. But now, you also bake bread in new shapes. You paint small suns on your fence posts. You invent jokes no one understands, but everyone laughs at anyway. Some historians will struggle to measure this. No documents, no records. Just a way of life that began with grief and grew into gentleness. You sit on your step with a warm mug, watching the sky shift colors. Someone plays a flute out of tune 2 houses down. You don't applaud. You don't analyze. You just listen. Because this right now is enough. And joy, real joy, has finally learned how to stay. So now, Your candle burns lower. The village grows still. You've wandered from mass graves to story circles, from the silence of broken bells to laughter stitched into handkerchiefs. Along the way, you helped invent holidays, hum forgotten lullabies, and dance with strangers beside carts and soup pots. Not because life was easy, but because it wasn't. And because, somehow, against all odds, joy returned anyway, quietly, then boldly, then every day. History often remembers the kings, the plagues, the policies, but not always the honey cakes, or the ribbon on the door, or the rooster song at sunrise. But you remember, and that's enough. Rest well. The world may be broken sometimes, but in the mornings, people still bake bread. Good night.